Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to be here to share with you some strategies on how to outsmart stress and anxiety. So first of all, I'd just like to get started with just reminding you that stress and anxiety are typical reactions that every one of us face when we're in a challenging situation. It's just normal. And especially when we're in a situation that's really challenging, let's say an illness, or if you're a caregiver for somebody who has an illness, having to deal with stress and anxiety is one of those situations that it's pretty typical. But I want to share with you today that it is something that you can manage, and you can do it in a not an easy manner, but with some little bit of dedication and a little bit of focus, you can really manage the stress and anxiety in a way that's not that difficult. So today's presentation is especially for anybody who's dealing with an illness or a caregiver, but it can be for any kind of stress and anxiety that you might be dealing with. So from small situations to very challenging situations, today we're going to learn some practical strategies and techniques for dealing with stress and anxiety. And we're going to learn a little bit about the difference between stress and anxiety. So throughout the program today, you are welcome to ask questions, and Nicole will be monitoring those questions, and I'll try to answer them in real time so I can address your questions and concerns as we go through the material. But there also will be a Q&A at the end, and we'll answer some questions then as well. So with that, why don't we just go ahead and get started. So I just want to go over the agenda for today for this program. So we're going to go over 4 different things. First of all, I'm going to share with you the difference between stress and anxiety. Stress has an upside to it, believe it or not, and anxiety is really the downside, and we're going to discuss the difference between the two. And then I want to share with you what the 4 major causes of anxiety are, because when you know what's underneath it, what's causing the anxiety, you'll be able to address it better. And then we're going to talk about different ways to alleviate anxiety in the short term and in the long term. And then at the end, we're going to wrap it up with 3 practical things that you can do right now to alleviate stress and anxiety. So kind of some real-time things that you can do in the moment to sort of bring down that feeling of anxiousness. So with that, why don't we move along and follow up. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought there was a technical difficulty, so forgive me. So the first thing I want to share with you is I want to talk a little bit about the difference between stress and anxiety. So as I mentioned, stress has an upside to it while anxiety doesn't. And so I want to give you kind of a new way of looking at stress. So think of stress as just some event or a circumstance in your life that is actually causing you to take action. So it's a demand that's being placed on you to take some sort of action. And we want to look at stress as sort of a neutral event, right? It's not good or bad. There's just something happening that I have to answer to, or that you have to answer to. So if we look at stress that way, we can see that stress can be a positive. And what I mean by that is that stress is actually just a warning, or it's a signal. Think of your smartphone when you get a notification. It's not bad or good, it's just something telling you that there's something that you need to address. So it's really helpful to look at stress as just a warning sign or a notification when you're feeling that feeling of stress. Maybe a little tension in your body, or your heart is beating a little faster, or you're having racing thoughts. A good way to look at that stress initially is like, oh, okay, it's just something that's telling me there's something I need to address in my life or in my body, whatever it is. When we think of stress this way, stress has an upside to it, right? It's just an early warning sign that there's something that we want to address. And when you do address stress in a timely manner and in a positive way, you can think of stress as a positive opportunity, right? It's not bad. So often people say stress is bad, but I want to share with you that you might want to look at the symptoms of stress or feeling stressed, at least the early onset feeling of it, as a good thing. This is a great notification that there's something I need to address. Now, to the opposite of that, well, before I get to that, when you look at stress that way, you want to realize that stress is actually an opportunity to raise your performance, right? Or it's an opportunity to raise your health or your well-being. If you address some type of illness or something going on in your body or even mentally or emotionally, when you address it early, it's a great opportunity to raise your performance, to increase your health and well-being. Now, on the opposite side of that, when something occurs, an event or a circumstance in your life that places a demand on you, okay, you're feeling stressed, this is the early stage, okay, something is happening I need to address. When you immediately go into fear and overwhelm about your ability to address that, now you're creating anxiety over the stress. So this type of response, instead of a positive response to the event, when you have a response that's full of overwhelm and fear, what happens is you start to create anxiety, and anxiety actually lowers your performance, right? Stress is an early warning sign, and it can raise your performance or your health and well-being because it's a signal to address things early. On the other hand, anxiety is when we are responding to stress with fear and overwhelm. So what that does, it's going to lower your performance. It's going to lower your well-being because anxiety is a sustained response of fear and overwhelm. So I just want to help you see it this way to separate stress and anxiety. So stress can be good because we can look at it as an early warning sign that something needs to be addressed. But when you get into the anxiety mode, right, when it goes on for a prolonged period of time and you're being very anxious about something, you can feel that anxiety in your body, or your emotions are full of anxiety, or your thoughts are racing and jumping from one place to another. All the different symptoms of being anxious, then you know that you have responded to the stress with fear and overwhelm. So it's important to separate the two because in our society, we have a tendency to say all stress is bad. And I want you to start thinking that no, stress is actually good, right? In the beginning, it's good because it's placing a demand on us that something needs to change or we need to somehow address it. And that's really good for us because it's a good early warning sign. A good way for me to kind of share this with you is think of a deadline when you have a deadline. At first, when you have a deadline, you might feel some stress, right? You might get a little worried. Can I meet that deadline? Things I need to do. But when you have anxiety about it, you're not actually addressing the problem or the deadline. You're not actually taking the steps that you need to take to address the deadline. You're just worrying about it, being concerned about it. So when you want to try and separate the definitions between stress and anxiety, what you want to think about is stress would be the initial deadline. You need to have something done by Friday. So that gives you sort of an alert, a warning. But anxiety would be sort of ruminating or brooding over the deadline and not really doing anything constructive about it. So just wanted to make sure we had this difference between stress and anxiety. Now, the way we want to respond to stress that's positive is called resilience. And so what resilience is it's a positive adaptation to whatever's going on, whatever the stressor is. And the second part of a healthy response to stress is post-traumatic growth. And what that means is you have a desire, you have a negative situation, something that's stressing you. You have a desire to use this situation as an opportunity to grow or get better or wiser as a person. So post-traumatic growth, and you can really apply this to illnesses, that you want to see the situation as an opportunity for you to grow as a person, to grow stronger mentally and emotionally. And also with resilience, you're going to adapt positively to this negative situation. Now, that doesn't mean when you have a negative situation, a negative circumstance, let's say an illness, or if you're caring for somebody with an illness, it is normal to have negative feelings and negative thoughts. You know, when something happens that we weren't expecting, it is so human and common and normal to at first respond negatively. I didn't want it to be this way. Why is this happening to me? Having feelings of sadness and grief, that is all normal, and I don't want to discount that at all. But once you accept these feelings and you're with them for a little bit, you now have a choice of how you want to respond. And I want to encourage everyone to think about that they can respond resiliently, and they can respond with a desire to grow as a result of this. So not to negate dire circumstances and any negative feelings or thoughts about it, but here's where the choice is after you come to terms with what you're feeling and thinking. You have a choice now. You can grow from this, and you can choose to adapt positively. So I want to move on then to what the causes of anxiety are. And if you're just joining us now, we are talking about how to outsmart stress and anxiety. I just went through the definitions of what stress and anxiety are and how there's an upside to stress but a downside to anxiety. So now I really want to talk about, well, what causes anxiety? What makes a person, when they're faced with a negative situation, go from just addressing the stress in a healthy way to creating anxiety? And there really are four major causes. And it's really important for us to understand them, because once we know what's causing the anxiety, we can then do something about it. So the first reason that we create anxiety is because of our interpretations. So let's say you get diagnosed with an illness, or somebody you love or are caring for has an illness. How you interpret that situation obviously is going to have an impact on what you're thinking and feeling and whether you're developing anxiety. So as I said before, it's normal to have thoughts like, why is this happening to me, or this shouldn't be happening to me. But I just want to make you aware that those interpretations are the seed for creating anxiety. So it's okay to have them, it's normal, but I also want you to know that that's also the reason that the anxiety starts to grow and build. So just knowing that how you're interpreting the situation, whether you're seeing it as really going off on a really bad trajectory, or are you saying, you know, this isn't good, but there's an opportunity here for me to grow or to heal or to get closer to some people. The way you're seeing the situation, the way you're interpreting the situation is going to have an impact on how much anxiety you're going to feel and create for yourself. So the number one underlying cause of anxiety is, how are you interpreting this information or the situation or the circumstances? The second cause of anxiety is a loss of control. So, you know, it's so interesting in life, really what makes us feel safe is this feeling of control over things. So I have control over my physical space, I have control over my body, I have control over whatever areas of our life that we feel we have control over. That makes us feel safe. So when we lose control, like in a stressful situation, or if we have an illness in our body, we may feel, wow, I've lost control of my body. That loss of control can really contribute to anxiety. And so this is really important, because we have this feeling when we lose control is that there's nothing I can do, there's nothing I can change, I can't influence it or impact it. You feel helpless. So recognize that when you're feeling anxiety, another reason you could be creating that, you may not be aware, is this idea that I've lost control somehow. So again, it's really important to understand what's the underlying cause of anxiety. So the second one is a feeling of loss of control. The third one is this idea of perfectionism. So we may not recognize it, but many people have this idea of perfect, right? I want my body to be perfect. I want to be in perfect health. I want to have a perfect relationship, perfect career, job, whatever it is. And so while having ideals is great, like what is my ideal perfect relationship or health or body, that's wonderful. But when you believe in this idea of perfection as a reality, what happens is it causes a lot of pressure when your reality doesn't match the perfection. So it doesn't mean that we can't have perfect moments in our life. You know, sometimes your body is in perfect health for the time being, or your relationship is perfect, or some circumstance in your life is just the way you want it. But I'm sure you recognize, as I have, you know, perfection doesn't last. We might have moments of perfection, but it's not sustainable. So when you believe in this idea of perfectionism, and you may not realize it, what happens is when things go wrong in life or they don't meet what our standards are for perfection, that can really create a deep hole in us, and it really creates a lot of anxiety. And we start to think things like life shouldn't be this way, or my body shouldn't be this way. So it's a good understanding to say, whoa, hold on a second, was I having this ideal of perfectionism as if it was true? So holding on to perfectionism as the truth is one of the underlying causes of anxiety, as if there is actually a way to attain perfect and sustain it. And then the last cause of underlying that causes anxiety is our inner critic. And I don't know about you, but I deal with an inner critic, and most people I work with do. And there's nothing wrong with an inner critic. In some ways, it can just keep you in line, making sure that you're doing what you're supposed to. But I would like to say when your inner critic becomes overwhelming and you have a very judgmental aspect to yourself that's constantly telling you what you're not doing right or that you're not worthy. In the case of an illness, you may criticize yourself for not taking care of yourself better, or something to that effect. Or if you're a caregiver and you don't see the person you're taking care of getting better, you may criticize yourself. So when you get really heavy on your inner critic and you really don't give yourself any breathing room, this can create a lot of anxiety. And it's almost an extension of perfectionism, if you think about it, right? You have this ideal of how how healthy you want to be or how much you want to help somebody, but you're not meeting that standard. So your inner critic kicks in and tries to tell you all the reasons why you don't have perfect health, or you can't recover, or if you're a caregiver, all the reasons why your caring isn't enough to make the person get healthier or feel better. So your inner critic is going to tell you that you're bad, that you're unworthy, that you can't do it, so on and so forth. So that creates obviously a lot of anxiety. And again, these 4 underlying causes of anxiety, they can kick in when you're just dealing with some exterior event, some stressful event, right? You're diagnosed with something happens in a relationship, whatever the outside stressor is, that's pretty neutral. How you respond to it is going to make all the difference. And if you respond from a place of one of these underlying beliefs, the way you're interpreting it, loss of control, perfectionism, or from an inner critic, it's pretty likely that you're going to start to create anxiety on top of the stress. So the anxiety is kind of a secondary thing that you create in addition to the stressful event that you have to deal with. So that being said, I really want to talk to you now about how you can alleviate anxiety if you feel that you become anxious when you're under stressful circumstances. And again, if you're just joining us, just want to share with you, we are talking about how to outsmart stress and anxiety. We've just gone through the 4 major causes of anxiety, and now I want to share with you how you can address anxiety. And there's 2 separate ways to address it. There is the short-term way to address anxiety and long-term. Now, there's short-term anxiety is really important. How do you address in the short term? A short-term solution is really important because in the moment you want to do something. What can I do right now to at least just lower the anxious feelings and the feelings in my body? So I want to give you some solutions for that. But the downside of a short-term solution is it doesn't last long. It's just temporary. So you're going to have to do it over and over and over again. So I also want to give you some long-term solutions that we'll talk about in a moment. But when you're feeling anxious, the first thing you want to do, and this is just important in general, is you want to check with your doctor or get a medical checkup. Why? Look, sometimes anxiety is biological. All of our nervous systems are wired differently, so you might have a different threshold for, anxiety, so different from somebody else. So if you're having anxiety for a sustained amount of time, you may want to check with your doctor and get a medical checkup and get that out of the way. That would be a quick short-term solution. You want to check with your doctor if you feel like this is something that I can't handle or it's too much for me, I'm feeling too much overwhelmed. Once you have that out of the way, or you've already checked with your doctor, the other short-term solutions that I want to give you are things you can do in the moment. And the most important thing is to breathe. I know that sounds crazy, like breathing, but breathing is the most instantaneous thing you can do. It's free. It's something you already do anyway. You don't need any special training for breathing. And when I talk about breathing, what we don't realize is that when we get anxious, we tend to breathe faster and very shallow. So what you want to do is take a deep breath, right? Long, slow, deep breaths will instantly, within a minute, will calm down your body. They'll stop the racing thoughts. Now, if you look on the internet, there are so many breathing techniques that you can look up. I don't really want to advocate any one for you, but you can check them out. But what you'll find they all have in common is that they ask you different techniques to slow your breathing down and to also take deeper breaths, like deep down into your belly, instead of just a short breath just up to here, like maybe into your throat. So it's interesting, but when we get anxious, we start breathing along the lines of like 12 to 14 breaths per minute. But when you start doing more quality breathing, slower breathing, you're actually slowing it down to 5 to 7 breaths per minute. So just think about that for a moment. If you just change your breathing from 12 to 14 breaths per minute to 5 to 7, it's going to have a real effect on your body right now in real time. And as you slow that down and relax the muscles in your body, because that's what it's going to do, it's going to relax you, that will also have an impact on your emotions and your thoughts. So the first short-term solution to anxiety, take a deep breath. The second thing is just taking a break or getting some rest. A lot of times when we're feeling anxious, we get so concerned about, I need to stop this, and maybe just take a break. Go outside, get in nature, taking a walk in nature, just being outside, taking a rest, taking a nap if you can, just going into another room for a few minutes. However you can take a break, depending on the situation that you're in, find a way to do it, because sometimes just getting away from the environment, away from the circumstance for just a few minutes can give you that chance to catch your breath, collect your thoughts, see things from a different perspective. Meditation is a great way in the moment to reduce anxiety. And meditation doesn't have to be a long, drawn out process. You don't have to go somewhere for a half an hour and do it. Sometimes meditation is just closing your eyes for a few minutes, repeating a mantra, or just focusing on your breath. There's lots of techniques in meditation. You can look them up on the internet at all. But just taking a break. So meditation is just another way to take a break, let's say, without having to remove yourself from whatever environment you're in. So sometimes if you're working, you're in the office, just close the door, turn off the computer, turn off your phone, and for 3 or 4 minutes, just breathe, close your eyes, and be quiet with yourself. Now, on the other hand, some people, it doesn't work to take a break or meditate. For some people, the way to lower anxiety is to actually go exercise. Go to the gym, jog, take a brisk walk, maybe do some yoga. For some people, they really need to get their blood flow going to actually release and relax the muscles in their body and to take their focus off of the thoughts that are going on in their mind. So sometimes exercise can be a great short-term solution when you're feeling anxious. And finally, just shifting your attention. Now, not everyone can do this, but if you give it a try, sometimes when you have an issue that you're focusing on and it's causing you a lot of anxiety, just shifting your attention to something else. You know, just call a friend, ask them, hey, how are you doing? Just want to focus on something else for a moment. For some people, I had a client I was talking to the other day. She says, when I get anxious, I clean my closet. I like to organize things. It's just a way to take your mind off of whatever's causing you the anxiety. But again, that's a short-term solution. You know, cleaning closets forever isn't going to get rid of the anxiety. It's just going to keep reoccurring. So these are just some strategies to help you in the moment to reduce the anxiety, so maybe you can address the situation with a little bit more calm and clarity. So those are short-term solutions, and those are great, and I advise you to use them as often as you can. But I want to go a little deeper now because I want to help you find a long-term solution to whatever is creating the anxiety for you. So we can understand now you may be in a negative situation or have negative circumstances occurring. and I empathize with that, and you might be having difficult feelings. But if you're able to use some of those short-term solutions and get to a place of a little bit more calm and clarity, when you can do some self-reflection, if you can, and I advise you to, because it will help you get to what's the underlying cause that's actually making me create more anxiety on top of this stressful situation I need to deal with. So there are 4 things you can do, 4 long-term solutions. And the first one that I want to talk to you about is I want you to think about, do I have a support system? And if I don't, I need to create one. And why is a support system good? Well, I want you to think of a support system as trusted people that you have in your life that you can talk to, that will be a non-judgmental sounding board. Now, this might be friends or family, or it might not be, and no judgment there. Just because someone's your friend or your family doesn't mean they can be a neutral sounding board. But a support system are people that can understand what you're going through and listen to what's going on, how you're interpreting the situation. Sometimes people go to a professional, a counselor or a coach, something like that. But you want a neutral person that you can talk to, because one of the causes of anxiety is how you're interpreting things. So the way to unwind that interpretation is to have somebody neutral that you trust, that you can share with and say, you know, this is happening to me and this is how I'm interpreting it. This is how I'm seeing it. It feels like the end of the world. It feels like I'll never deal with it. It feels like I can't, so on and so forth. So if you can find that support system, some neutral person in your life that you can speak to that in a non-judgmental way will listen to you, will maybe reflect back. Because the reason for a sounding board, a neutral sounding board, is you just want to hear somebody reflect back what you're thinking and saying and believing about the situation. And sometimes when you just hear that, you go, oh, well, that doesn't make sense, or that's not helpful. So that neutral sounding board that you would get from a support system is super important.
Jo-Aynne, we have a question.
Oh, great.
Can you give some quick and easy tips to positively reframe our negative emotions?
So that great question, because emotions are one of those things, those experiences that we feel like we have no control over, right? I just suddenly feel sad, or I have overwhelming grief or despair. And so might sound counterintuitive, but one of the best things you can do when you encounter a negative emotion, the most positive thing you can do, is to be okay with it. Here's what I want to share. When we resist our negative emotions, they only get stronger. The reason a negative emotion comes up, it's kind of like a warning flag. It's like, hey, you need to listen to something here. I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling anxious, or whatever it is. So we have a tendency to want to run away from the negative or fix it right away, and I totally get that. But what I want to share is, allow it to be there. Now, not to the point that it's causing you intense pain or you can't handle it, but just a little bit. Sit with it for a moment. Sometimes when we are feeling physically sick, we get scared, or we have fear or despair. So sometimes just a few minutes with, okay, what does this feel like? What does the negative emotion feel like in the body, right? For me, when I have a negative emotion, I usually feel it in my stomach. For some people, it's tension in their shoulders or a headache. So a good way to be with those negative emotions is just to sense, where am I feeling this in my body? And what that does is, again, it kind of distracts you a little from why am I feeling this and I don't want to feel it, to being more curious about how am I feeling it. And by paying attention to the negative emotion, believe it or not, it starts to dissipate. So the short answer to the question is, the most practical and positive thing you can do when you have a negative emotion is to pay attention to it and just to feel where it is in your body. And just doing that, it will start to dissolve, and you will feel like you have a little more control over it, which is probably what you want to feel when it comes to a negative emotion.
Thank you, Jo-Aynne. We have one other question that just came in.
Sure.
We can also ask, how often do we self-check?
So for our emotions, I think it's important to self-check as much as possible. When you're dealing with an illness, I think it's really important to check on how you're feeling all the time. And to also, whatever you find, have some compassion for yourself. And even if you find an emotion that you don't like or is hard to deal with, tell yourself, it's okay. You want to treat yourself as you would treat somebody you love. So if there's some negative feeling that you're feeling and you don't like the feeling, it's okay to say, hey, I can feel that grief. It doesn't feel good, but it's okay. So that's one of the first things that you want to do. But I think checking in, self-check, is really important when you're dealing with an illness. It's also important when you're talking with somebody else in conflicts with other people. You really want to be checking in. How am I feeling about things? Because feelings are warning signs. They're red flags that are telling you something you need to deal with. So if you ignore a negative feeling, you may ignore some wisdom that's coming to you. Thank you for the question. Great question, by the way.
One more question. I
Sure.
don't have a strong support system at home. What are some alternatives?
So, well, if you're dealing with an illness, there are a lot of foundations that are created specifically to address that foundation, that illness. If you have stomach cancer, Debbie's Dream Foundation is an excellent one. But whatever circumstance you're facing, if it's not an illness, but it could be some mental or emotional challenge, there are so many foundations that you can find on the internet, resources that you can find, people that are ready and willing to help you and support you. You can also call a counselor or a coach. And if you don't know anybody in your immediate circle, I would suggest that you start with some kind of outside resource. And through that, you may make friends and have allies that can help you. But I would start with some of the foundations and resources that you can find on the internet that are dealing with whatever situation you're dealing with. Because those are people that have already collaborated and gotten together and created support systems because they know just how important that is. So don't be shy. Look for resources and reach out. So if there's no other questions, I'm going to continue. But please, if you have more questions, don't feel shy. Just ask away. You might be asking a question that somebody else is too shy to ask, and it could really be a help to them. So let's go back to how do we actually then address in a long-term solution anxiety. And the first one was creating a support system. And if you don't have one, how you can create a support system. So reach out to those resources in that area. The second one is to take control of what you can. This idea when we're in a difficult situation that I have no control is a really devastating thought to have. So what I want to share with you is that although you may feel that at first, I have no control over this. So let's even talk about the pandemic. Many people felt when the lockdowns happened, they had no control. There was nothing they could do. So while agreed that it seems that way, or if you have an illness in your body, it might seem there's nothing I can do. This illness is ravaging my body and there's nothing I can do to stop it. There is always something you can do relevant to that situation. And one of the places that every one of us has an opportunity to feel some sense of control is what we're thinking and feeling, the words we say, and the actions we take. Now again, sometimes thoughts and feelings feel like they're out of our control, right? I just have these thoughts, I don't know where they came from, or I'm just feeling these negative emotions and I can't control it. It's true, when they pop up, we don't have control over that. However, we do have control what we do with them. Do I nurture these negative feelings, or do I just sit with them and say, you know what, it's okay that you're there, we'll get through this together. Or I can talk to my own thoughts that way. I hear you, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not sure I really want to go down that road with you. You're there, but I may not engage with you. So you can respond to your thoughts and emotions with compassion, but you also don't have to jump in and engage and nurture them and grow them. And then the other area of control is the words that we speak and the actions we take. The choice of your words is going to impact not only how you feel and think, but how other people feel and think. So the words you choose when you describe what you're going through or how you speak to other people is going to have a huge impact, not only on you and other people. So that's another choice that you can make, right? Let's talk about the lockdowns from the pandemic. How you talked about the lockdowns was going to have an impact on your attitude and other people's attitude. Your illness, how you talk about your illness is going to have an impact on you and other people. and also, of course, the actions you take, as well as the actions you don't take. Sometimes it's good not to do something, but sometimes our inaction will actually hurt us rather than help us, right? If we aren't proactive enough. So the second thing to counter the cause of anxiety is to recognize there is always something you can take control of, and to actually focus on that. When you have those thoughts of, it's out of control, there's nothing I can do, you can say, well, I don't know if that's really true. There is something I can control, and it always starts with how I respond to my thoughts, my emotions, and what words I speak and what actions I take. Now, the third way we can deal with this idea of perfection is we can recognize that imperfection is actually the reality. As human beings, we are imperfect, okay? There is no such thing as a perfect person, a perfect circumstance, a perfect relationship, a perfect career. It just doesn't exist. So if you find that perfectionism was kind of one of those hidden beliefs that was driving your anxiety, you can rectify that by saying, the truth is, there is no such thing as perfection, at least in a sustainable way. Again, you might have a perfect moment, a perfect date, one perfect day at work, but it's not sustainable. So once you recognize that imperfection is the reality, what this helps you do is it frees you. It frees you as a person to be able to fail. And I know there's a lot of people have this phrase, failure isn't an option. I don't think that's such a good phrase. The truth is, failure is an option. It's okay to fail. You know why? Because when you fail, it's your greatest opportunity to grow. If you go and study a course or read a book, you're not going to learn as well as when you fail at something and then you learn from it. When something feels like a failure, let's say you feel like your body is failing you, that is your greatest opportunity to grow. Remember I talked about post-traumatic growth? This is exactly where growth happens. When you feel like you failed at something or your body is failing, this is your opportunity to have a desire to become a better person, a wiser person, a stronger person mentally and emotionally. If you create that kind of meaning around your stress, around your negative situation, that will pull you through, right? There's nothing worse than having negative circumstances or a situation and it seems meaningless, right? There's no reason for it. Nothing good is going to come of it. If you find yourself in that situation, you want to find meaning. And the biggest meaning you can find is, how can I get better through this situation? Not bitter. How can I get better, stronger, wiser, emotionally, mentally? How can I become a better person? Whatever it is that works for you. But you want to be able to be able to see that there's meaning in this situation that you're going through. And then the last one is the inner critic. And I think the best way to offset the inner critic, you're never going to get rid of that inner critic. It's there. But the best way to offset that is to commit to being a learner. When you commit to learning, any criticisms that you could give yourself are just an opportunity to figure it out. So if you find your inner critic saying, why do you always do this? Your health is never good. You never take care of yourself. That's a great opportunity to say, you know what, you're right. And I am going to learn how to be healthier mentally, emotionally, physically. You create a commitment to learning. And when you do that, you can never feel inferior or unworthy or less than again, because the feelings of feeling inferior or unworthy come from this idea that I can't do anything about it. It's just the way I am. And that isn't true. When you commit to learning, you can always change and grow. So if you want to offset that inner critic, if you don't ever want to feel unworthy or inferior in any way, you just commit to being a learner and use every opportunity, every hardship as a way to say, I'm going to learn about this. I'm going to figure it out. I want to see what other people are doing. And that immediately takes you out of that helplessness and that inferiority and puts you in a place of power. That's empowering. To be a learner is empowering. So if you find yourself having that inner critic, beating you down and making you feel like you're less than, you can just bounce back by being a learner and empowering yourself and coming from a place of power where you can say, this situation is an opportunity for me to learn and grow. So those are the 4 ways to offset anxiety. Create a support system if you don't have one. Have a neutral sounding board, someone you can talk to. Take control of what you can. There's always something. Accept imperfection as the reality and be okay with that. And that means failure is an opportunity to grow. And then be a learner. Commit to learning to offset any feelings of inferiority that you could ever feel. So with that, I'd like to just share 3 practical steps in the moment. And this is just kind of pulled from everything I've talked about, but these are kind of 3 key takeaways that if nothing else, I gave you a lot of information and hopefully you'll go back and listen to it again. But here are 3 key things that you can do in the moment when you feel yourself anxious and overwhelmed. Number 1, breathe. Slow your breathing down. In whatever way you can, take a deep breath and start to slow your breathing down. The second thing you can do is I want you to either write, you can get a journal or just a piece of paper and write down what you're feeling and what you're thinking. If you don't like to write, you can take an app on your smartphone and record it. Just talk into it. This is what I'm thinking, this is how I'm feeling, just record it. Or if you do have that trusted friend, call somebody, a neutral sounding board, and say, I just have to let you, just please listen to me. I need to share how I'm feeling. The point of doing any one of those, writing them down, recording yourself, or speaking to somebody else is you want to get the feelings and the thoughts out of you and out on the table. Why? Because the third step, you want to be mindful, you want to be objective, you want to be able to step away from yourself and the situation and see it more objectively. But you can't do that when the feelings and the thoughts are all inside of you. So you need a step. So you can either write it down on a piece of paper and look at it, read it back, record it, or talk to somebody else and let them reflect back to you. When you can see, when you can hear or listen back to how you're thinking and feeling, you can look at it much more objectively and you can say, wow, that doesn't make sense, or you can have more compassion for yourself. But one of the things, the most important thing you need to do besides breathing is to somehow get an objective perspective on what's happening. And the best way to do that is either to write it, record it, or speak to somebody else and let them reflect it back to you. So those are 3 things that you can do right away in the moment to decrease your anxiety and deal with your stress. So with that, if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
One question is, tips, can I have some tips to reframe, my failures?
To reframe, so that's great. And so reframing is a fantastic strategy. So reframing is just another way to say it or another way to look at it. So how would you reframe failure? Well, I alluded to that earlier. Failure is an opportunity to grow, right? It's an opportunity to learn. If I never fail at anything, then I don't have any desire to grow or learn, right? Because if everything is wonderful and I always do everything right, there's no opportunity for growth. The only motivation there would be for me to change the way I'm doing anything is if something doesn't work. So in that respect, failure is great. Failure is a great opportunity to learn and grow. So whatever words work for you, but look at failure as your opportunity to become better in some way. And just remember, if you didn't have that failure, you'd have no motivation to grow or change. So failure is a good thing.
You also mentioned working out and meditation. Are there any other recommendations to physically expel my anxiety?
So sure, I mean, working out can be working out at the gym, but for some people, they combine, they do a walking meditation. So they're walking and they're repeating, let's say, a mantra. Tai Chi is a wonderful moving meditation. It's a martial art that's very slow and you're very in tune with your body. It's not very physically demanding, but it combines the best of moving, because some people like to move, and also meditation, because it's a very mindful practice, Tai Chi. You have to be very focused on all of your hand movements and the movements of your body. So Tai Chi is a great moving meditation. So it just depends on your personality. Some people experience anxiety very agitated, and so they need to move to sort of expel that extra energy. Other people feel anxiety kind of like a depressed feeling in their body, so they need maybe some just relaxed time to just sort of let that move out. So I would say any combination of movement, and sometimes dancing is great. I know I actually do dancing. I like to do partner dancing, ballroom dancing, tango dancing. But dancing, can be a great stress reliever and can lower anxiety. And you don't have to do anything formal like go to a class. You can just be at home and flip on the music to great music and move, and that can be a great reliever of anxiety. So I think you just have to recognize for yourself what works better. Do I want something that's moving to expel energy, or do I need something quiet and restful to calm me down? And that's a personal choice.
Thank you for that. And let me see if we have any other questions. Well, I think we have all of our questions answered.
Great, great.
Thank you so much, Jo-Aynne.
My pleasure.
And we really look forward to helping you. Is there a way that people can reach out to you and maybe get some more one-on-one information?
Sure. If I can answer any questions, just feel free. My website is www.readysetmore.com. That's my company name. And feel free to email me. There's contact information on the website. If I can share any more tips, I'd be happy to.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone who joined in and who's watching. We also want to make sure that you're ready for episode 3 of the Mind, Body, and Spirit on June 11th at 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time with Zaida Vallejo, who's going to do a guided meditation session. So make sure you join in for that. Thank you so much. Thanks again, Jo-Aynne.
You're welcome. Take care.